A struggling waitress saved a man from a bar fight. She had no idea he was the CEO of the chain. Friday nights at Hale's place were a special kind of madness. The lights were low, flashing in neon blue and blood red. The music pulsed like a second heartbeat, heavy and relentless. Laughter mixed with shouting. Glasses clinked and spilled. And somewhere in the corner, someone was already drunk enough to sing off-key. Christine Carter weaved between theaboys, like she had done 100 nights before. Blonde hair pulled tight in a non-incense bun. No lipstick, no flirting, no games. Her black apron was stained with syrup and sweat, her sneakers worn at the toes. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to work. She jotted orders, cleaned spills, mixed drinks, and offered quiet nods instead of smiles. She wasn't rude, but she never lingered. She never drank with customers, never stayed after her shift, and never gave her number out. She came, she worked, she left alone. Christine didn't belong in a bar like this, but it paid the bills. And after her mother's cancer had drained every dime of her savings and every ounce of her energy, she had little choice left. She was halfway through her shift when she saw him. Again, the quiet man in the corner booth. He had come in a few times before, always alone, always silent. Tonight, he wore a dark hoodie. The hood pushed back to reveal a strong jaw and intense eyes that scanned the room like he was reading every thought. Ryan, something about the way he sat apart, how he sipped his drink instead of guzzling it, made him a target. She knew thought, look, the stillness that made insecure men uncomfortable. And sure enough, trouble found him. 3 men Athbar already. Several shots deep had turned their attention his way. They laughed too loudly, shoulders squared, alcohol twisting their words into threats. The biggest of the 3 stepped forward. Hey, tough guy, Hesslered, pointing a thick finger toward Brian. You think you're better than us? Sitting there all quiet like you own Theplis? Brian didn't answer. He didn't flinch. His hand remained calmly around his glass. Christine froze for a second. She recognized the signs, the posturing, the tension, the inevitable explosion. Just like that night when she was 10, when her father tried to stop their drunk neighbor from hitting his wife. The man had turned on her dad instead, beat him bloody whiles, screamed from behind the couch. No one had helped. Not tonight. She moved fast. Hey, Christine called, stepping between them. Back bar's got a new whiskey tasting free for the first 5. You guys look like you could use something smoother. 2 of the men paused, interest flickering. But the biggest one, the ringleader, wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on Brian. You too good to talk to me, Hespat? He stepped in too close, cocked his arm back. Christine saw the fist before it flew. Muscle memory took over. With one hand, she dropped her tray. A loud crash of glass that startled the crowd. With the other, she stepped in and jabbed her elbow into the drunk's side just under the rib cage, where she knew it would hurt like hell without leaving a mark. He gasped and stumbled back. You just assaulted me, he barked, red-faced, arms flailing to regain balance. No, Christine said coolly, stepping in front of Brian. You were about to assault someone? I stopped you. The man looked ready to explode. But now the room was watching. People had turned, phones were up, eyes wide. She leaned in and lowered her voice. Phew, throw one more punch in this bar. I will make sure you don't walk out of here tonight. Your choice. The man stared at her for a long moment. Then, with a curse, he shoved past the crowd, disappeared toward the exit road. His friends followed, murmuring. Silence hung in the air for a few seconds. Then the music swelled again. People resumed their drinking, and Christine bent down to gather the broken glasses from the floor. When she stood, Brian was still there, staring at her. You okay? She asked. He studied her face for a moment longer, as if searching for something. Then he nodded. Thanks. She nodded back, wiping her hands on her apron. Next time, sit closer to the bar. Brian gave the ghost of a smile, noted. And just like that, she turned and walked away. Another table needed clearing. Another drink needed pouring. But something had shifted. Something had started. After that, night, Brianda sobered. Christine kept glancing toward the far booth where he had sat, half expecting to see his calm, unreadable face again. But days passed. Friday came and went, and he did not return. It was just as well, she told herself. She did not need distractions. Not from strange men with stormy eyes. Not from ghosts and booze. She had bills to pay, rent, tuition loans she could not afford. A fridge with expired yogurt and half a bottle of hot sauce. In silence. Smuch S. She had her 15-minute break at 2:00. I am, and same as always. Outside the back door, she sat on a plastic crate, lighting a cigarette. She would only half finish. The night air was cool, fecund that clung to skin like memory. Christine pulled her jacket tight and stared at nothing, a flickering street lamp, the echo of laughter from inside. She remembered the way her father's body crumpled on the pavement, the blood that pooled beside his mouth. The neighbor, drunk, raging, unpunished. She had only been 10. She remembered her mother's hands trembling from chemotherapy. Out, her voice whispering, "Promise me you'll finish school." Booch had not finished. She had dropped out of her 3rd year in psychology. Too many hospital visits. Too many side jobs. Her mother died 6 months after Christine left school alone. Just the two of them, until the end. Now just one. Every day since had felt like survival on autopilot, like waking up with an old contract to keep breathing and doing just enough to get by. She had wanted to help people, understand them, maybe even heal something. Now she wiped down sticky tables and memorized drink specials. Still, something about that night lingered. The way Brian had looked at her, not surprised, not grateful even, just seeing her. Like he recognized something behind the practiced calm in her face. Christine shook her head, stubbing out the cigarette. Back to work. 1 week later, just before her shift ended, her manager called her upstairs. "Christine," he said, flat tone, unreadable. "You got a minute?" Her stomach dropped. She followed him to the tiny office behind the stockroom where liquor inventory files sat in haphazard piles. She stood in front of the desk, trying not to look nervous. "You're not in trouble," the manager said, noticing her expression. "Relax." "Christine," he pulled out a piece of paper and slid it across the desk toward her. "We got a note from corporate." She blinked. "Corporate." He nodded. "Apparently, Yonef, our customers last Friday is a big deal. VIP level said you prevented an incident. Wanted to pass on their compliments." Christine frowned, arms folded. "All I did was stop a drunk from swinging." "Yeah, well, it impressed somebody. There's also a request. More like a recommendation. They suggested we consider you for shift-led training." She stared. "Shift-led, not a guarantee, but you're on the list now." Christinelle looked down at the note. "No name, just a printed line. Your staff made a difficult situation disappear before it escalated. Efficient, calm, smart, no signature." Just like that, the door to something shifted open. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, the praise or the idea that anyone was watching. Close enough to care. "Why now?" she murmured. The manager shrugged. "Right place, right time, Carter. Take the win." Kristen left the office, still holding the paper in her hand. The night shift was already beginning, the lights buzzing to life, the music starting up again. Back to the noise, the crowd, the routine. But for the first time in a long time, Kristen allowed herself one small dangerous thought. Maybe things don't always stay the same forever. It was nearly 2 weeks later when Christine saw him again. At first, she didn't recognize him. The bar was just as loud, just as chaotic. It was another Thursday, edging toward midnight, the kind of shift where everything blurred. Music, laughter, spilled drinks, forgettable faces. Button, in the corner booth, where shadows like to gather, a man sat quietly, a hooded sweatshirt hanging loose from his shoulders, a scruff of beard now softening the sharp lines of his jaw. Head did not speak, he did not wave her over. He just watched. Christine passed by him twice without noticing. The third pass she paused, sensing something. High size followed the motion of her hands as she wiped down a table. But when she looked directly at him, he shifted slightly, just enough to blend again into the hum of background noise. She didn't think much of it. After all, the bar had hundreds. of customers a week, and Christine didn't have the energy to give any one person too much space in her mind. Her focus stayed on the job. Orders to fill, spills to clean, names to remember. Still, from time to time, she caught a flicker of his presence. In the corner of her eye, Ryan sat there for over an hour. He watched her move, efficient, quiet, always a step ahead of the chaos. He watched her slip a napkin to a teenage girl crying into her drink near the jukebox. No questions asked. Christine didn't even pause, just handed the girl a warm glass of water and a fresh towel, then moved on like it was second to nature. Later, when the rush began to thin, he watched as Christine took a folded $5 bill from her apron, walked out the side door, handed it to the elderly man sitting against the alley wall with a cardboard sign. Just hungry. Oh. No one saw except Brian. Christine came back in like nothing had happened, tied her apron again, and returned to wiping the counters. She never looked his way. Brian sipped his drink slowly. It was just a light beer, half warm, but he never asked for another. He stayed until close to last call, then finally stood and pulled his hoodie back over his head. Christine was in the back when he left. She didn't see him go, but when she returned to the corner booth to clean, there was a note tucked neatly under the glass, written on a piece-off burr napkin folded twice. No name, just 6 words in clean, steady handwriting. Thank you for not giving up. And beneath it, one more line. You reminded me not to either. Christine read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't know why it made her throat tighten. Maybe it was because someone had noticed. Not just the fight weeks ago, not just her stepping in front of that swinging fist, but everything else. The small things. The things no one ever clapped for. Christine stood in the quiet corner of the bar for a moment longer than usual, then got back to work. She had dishes to clear, floors tom up, and a strange, unexpected warmth burning in the center of her chest. Ryan started coming back to the bar, but not every night, not on a schedule, just often enough that Christine began to notice. He never stayed long, an hour, maybe 2. He always sat in the same corner booth, ordered one drink, and never asked for more. He did not flirt. He never asked her personal questions. He just talked. Some nights it started with books. Christine was shelving a few paperbacks behind the counter donated by customers, mostly old and worn, and Brian asked if she'd read The Old Man and the Sea. I tried, she said, but I couldn't get past fish metaphors. He chuckled. That's the whole point. Well, she said, maybe I wasn't ready for the point. And that's how it began. Over the next few weeks, the conversations deepened. They spoke of solitude, of people who disappear, of mores that press themselves into your bones. Brian had a way of speaking without really saying things. Kristen attests that he would talk around subjects like they were made of glass, as if too much weight would break them. But even in their avoidance, they somehow grew closer. One night he mentioned a brother, Matisse, to get into fights, Brian said, eyes locked on the amber swirl of his drink. Not because he was angry, just small, and people noticed, took advantage. Christine listened. I stepped it in once, he continued. Didn't end well. He got quiet after that. Stopped talking to me. Stopped trusting people. I think he didn't say more, but the silence around his words filled in the blanks. Another night, Christine shared a story about her mother. She used to say, that people show you their hearts when they're not trying to, she said. That the loudest person in the room is often the loneliest. That cruelty usually comes from someone who's drowning. Brian looked at her. She sounds like she was a beautiful person. She was, Kristen said softly, until she got sick. Then she was just tired. They never talked directly about their pain. They didn't need to. It sat in the spaces between their sentences. In the way Christine placed a coaster under Brian's drink without asking. The way he once left her a bookmark tucked into the spine of a psychology textbook someone had donated. You'd be great at this. Sometimes they would sit in silence for minutes at a time, not awkward, comfortable, like their presence alone was enough. There was a stillness to those moments that Christine had never known with anyone else. A kind of quiet thought didn't demand filling. One evening, close to closing time, The bar was quieter than usual. A soft jazz track hummed through the speakers. Krista Nua wiping down the table next to Brian's booth when he reached to move his. Glass in her hand brushed his. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't planned, but the contact, brief, warm, electric, froze them both. Christine's hand paused over the table. Brian's fingers lingered an extra second before pulling away. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. In that moment, under the dim lights and the faded poster of a blues singer above the booth, something pissed between them. Not just attraction, it was recognition. Two people who had lived through different storms. Suddenly realizing they'd survived the same kind of rain, Christine looked away first. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she said nothing. Just finished wiping the table and walked back behind the bar. Brian stayed a little longer that night. Not tottering, not to talk, just to sit, just to be near her. It was a slow afternoon when Christine saw it. She had stopped by the corner market to pick up a cheap sandwich and a pack of instant noodles. The bar didn't open for another 2 hours, and she had time to kill. As she stood in line, her eyes drifted to the rack of magazines and local newspapers. Near the register, that was when her heart stopped. There on the front page of a national business feature was his face. The headline read, "Brian Hale, they own CEO behind America's fastest-growing bar chain." But, and under it, a photo, clear, confident, undeniable, was Brian Dressadine, a crisp suit, standing in front of a polished building with the Hale & Co. logo. Gleaming behind him, Christine stared, disbelief curling through her chest like smoke. She didn't hear the cashier call her twice until the guy behind her nudged her shoulder. "Mies," she mumbled an apology, paid for her things, and stuffed the paper into her bag like it might burn her fingers. Back at her apartment, she sat at her kitchen table. The newspaper spread out in front of her like a betrayal in ink. He had lied, not directly, but still every night he sat in that booth asking her about books, about dreams, about her past, while hiding a truth this big. And knew who he was, she didn't. That changed everything. By the time her shift started, the anger had hardened into something cold, something sharp. That night when Brian walked into the bar, his hoodie zipped halfway, hands in his pockets, Christine didn't greet him. She didn't bring him his usual drink. Waited until he was settled, until the bar had enough noise to cover rezzed voices. Then she walked to his booth, dropped the paper in front of him. He looked down. His expression didn't change. "Make this true," she said. Hem at her eyes, calm as ever. "Yes." Christine's voice was low but firm. "You're a CEO of this place. Of all of this, and you've been sitting here like some drifter, letting me talk about broken dreams while you already have everything." "I don't have everything," Brian said quietly. She ignored that. Was this some kind of test? See if the poor barmaid has character? Or maybe you just wanted a bit of fun. Slum it for a while. "No," he said. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it, Brian?" Rose cracked. Despite herself, because it sure as hell feels like manipulation. He didn't flinch. "I came here," he said slowly, "because I was tired of being seen as just the name, the title, the number on the boardroom screen. I need a place where no one expected anything, where I could just be me." Kristen folded her arms. "And you picked?" "My bar sat in my section. Let me open up to you, Heil. You held back everything." "I didn't lie," Brian said. "I didn't pretend to. Someone else." "You didn't have to," she snapped. "You just let me believe you were something you weren't." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on Thedable. His voice softened. "I wanted you to see the man, Christine. Not the CEO. Not the money, not the business. Just me. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I just liked talking to you, listening to you. I never wanted to hurt you." Christine's eyes welled, but she held them back. She hated crying at work. "I don't need saving," she said. "I didn't need a man with a title and a company. I just needed someone real." "I was real," he said. "With you, I was more real than I've been in years." But the damage was done. Christine stepped back, voice trembling now. "I need space. Don't come here for a while." Brian stood slowly, nodded once. I understand. He left without another word. And Christine, for the first time in a long while, felt something tear open in her chest. Not rage, not betrayal, just something that felt a lot like loss. Christine stopped going to the bar on her nights off. She switched shifts when she could, closed early when she couldn't. And yet, his absence filled Therum like static. Every time the door opened, her pulse flicked with hope. Anthan dropped again. She hated that. Hated herself for noticing, for caring, for waiting. For watching the door like some half-written character in a romance novel she never believed in. So she started staying home more. Her apartment was still silent in a way that no bar could ever be. But it was the kind of silence that hummed with memory, not peace. She cleaned the same countertop 3 times in a row, rearranged books she had already read, sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of tea that went cold in her hands. It had been years since she'd touched her sketchbook. But one rainy afternoon, she pulled it from a dusty box under Thebed. The cover was frayed, the binding loose, pages were stiff, curling at edges, full of abandoned drawings, faces without eyes, figures in motion, hands reaching for something unseen. She had drawn those when her mother was sick. Long nights at the hospital, long mornings, working double shifts. Drawing was the only thing that made time stop hurting for a while. Christine sat by the window in her small apartment, the rain ticking softly against the glass, and began to draw again. At first it was nothing. Scribbles, lines, shapes. Then came the shadows. She drew the corner booth of the bar from memory, the one Brian always sat in, the way the light hit his profile, the curve of his shoulder as he leaned in, always listening more than speaking. She added a glass on the table, half full, forgotten. A folded napkin, eh? Glint in his eyes that had always felt like a question she hadn't yet answered. And those eyes, dark, focused, full of something she hadn't known how to name. Loneliness. That was what it was. Christine stepped back and looked at the drawing. It made her chest ache. Not because she missed him, though she did, but because in that stillness, in that moment, frozen in graphite, she finally saw what Shedden wanted to admit. He hadn't been hiding. He'd been serving just like her. They had both walked into that bar wearing masks, not to deceive, but to protect. To shield themselves from expectations, from assumptions, from the fragile places inside them that still ought to be known, to make it through one more night, one more conversation, one more moment without unraveling. Maybe without realizing it, they had become each other's mirror. Maybe they had become each other's proof that even guarded hearts still long for warmth. Christine stared at the sketch, her fingers still smudged with pencil, and whispered to no one. Why did I think I was the only one hurting? She set the drawing aside, her eyes lingered on Itens more, as if it might change or speak back. That night, she walked past Hale's place after her shift, slowing down outside the window. The lights were low, the music distant. Someone else was at the register. A young man cleaned the bar, humming to himself. Brian was not there, but his ghost was, and hers too, maybe. Christine didn't go inside, not yet. But she stood there for a long time watching the quiet booth in the corner. The one that now lived in her sketchbook and in something deeper, something she had not dared name. Not love, not yet, but something real, something waiting. Something that felt like a question, still unanswered. The rain came down in sheets that night, hammering against the pavement, washing the streets in streaks of silver and shadow. Christine's shift had run late. One of the bartenders called in sick, and the dishwasher jammed again. By the time she left Hale's place, her clothes were of beer and bleach, and her body ached from 12 hours on her feet. She turned the corner toward her apartment building, head down, keys clenched in her fist, and then she stopped. Brian was standing at the foot of her steps. No umbrella, no jacket soaked through, hair dripping into his eyes. He looked like he had been there for hours. Christine froze. They stared at each other through the rain, the silence louder than the storm. "I know I shouldn't be here," he said, voice rough, "but I didn't know where else to go." She didn't move. "Why are you here?" Brian stepped forward, then stopped. He looked exhausted, not from the rain, but from something deeper. "Then I didn't come to explain," he said. "I came to tell the truth." Christine waited. "I don't know how to love people third white way," Brian said. I wasn't raised to... I've spent most of my life in rooms where trust is currency and everything has a cost." Looked up. "But you didn't want anything from me, and that terrified me." Christine did speak. Brian reached into his coat pocket, paused, then slowly pulled out asmal-wrapped object, a thin frame protected in plastic. He held it out. "I found this behind the bar. I think you dropped it. I didn't know it was yours at first." Christine took it with trembling hands, a photograph baited but lovingly restored, her mother smiling. The photo she had carried in her apron, the one she thought she'd lost forever. She gasped. "I had it cleaned up," Brian said. "Didn't know if I'd ever get that chance to give it back, but I hoped." Christine clutched it to her chest. Tears came fast. "You kept this," she whispered. He nodded. It looked like it mattered. "And because I needed to hold on to something that wasn't about me," she stepped back, unsure. The storm between them had quieted, but doubt still circled her heart. "Be mine now?" she asked. Brian's voice lowered. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. How you talk to people in pain. How you give without asking. How you saved me that night and didn't even ask my name." He swallowed. "I've lost a lot in my life, Christine. Some I let go. Some I ran from. But if I walk away from this, from you, I'll be letting go of the only thing that truly matters. A breath. I didn't come here as a CEO. I came here as a man who's made mistakes, who's been alone a long time, and who's string not to lose the one good thing he never expected to find." Christine stood still, photo pressed to her chest, the rain now only a drizzle. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Brian, true to his word, didn't reach for her. He simply stood, arms at his sides, eyes open, vulnerable, waiting. It was the stillness that undid her, not the speech, not the photo, the stillness. The quiet surrender of a man with nothing left to prove and everything to hope for. Christine stepped forward slowly, carefully, and without a word, leaned into him. Just enough that her forehead touched his damp shoulder. He didn't move, but his breath caught. And under the street lamp, in the soft hush of a city finally sleeping, they stood together in their ain. Not as strangers, not as boss and employee, just two hearts, tired, aching, but still beating, finding rhythm at last. 6 months after the night in the rain, Hale's place no longer looked the same. It still had the music, the laughter, the lowlightses. But now there was something gentler underneath the noise. A shelf of donated books stood near the entrance with a small sign that read, "Take one, leave one." Along the back wall hung paintings and pencil sketches, most of them Christine's. And once a month the music would fade early. Anthe tables would be moved aside for a different kind of gathering. Open conversations on healing, anxiety, grief, and rebuilding led by Christine. She never wore a microphone. She just spoke like she always had, soft, honest, never asking for attention, but always earning it. In the daytime, she was back at school. Christine had re-enrolled in her psychology program the week after that rainy night. The tuition had been covered by an anonymous scholarship. The letter had no name, but she had smiled when she read it. knew exactly who had sent it. Brian never mentioned it, but he showed up every Thursday afternoon to walk her home. Sometimes they talked about lectures. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. But always, they walked side by side. In the fall, she graduated. The ceremony was held under the golden leaves of the university courtyard. Christine stepped to the podium in her gown, hers peach clutched in a hand that had known both exhaustion and grace. "I used to believe life would always look the same," she began. "That it would always mean double shifts, cold leftovers, and too many bills." She paused, scanning the crowd. Her eyes found Brian standing off to the side, hands in his pockets, smiling. But then someone came along, not to salve me, not to give me things, but to remind me I was still worth more than survival, that even when life hardens you, there are people who will see through the armor. Her voice softened. I'm not hereditary because I'm strong. I'm here because someone loved me in the exact way I needed, quietly, steadily, with no conditions. Tears shimmered in a few corners of the crowd. Brian wiped high sighs without looking away. A year later, they were married. The wedding was held in the backyard of Hale's place under string lights and soft music. But the guests weren't society elites or business partners. They were bar staff. The homeless man Christine once gave her tips to, a few classmates, and a framed photo of her mother placed gently on the first table with a candle burning beside it. Christine wore a dress the color of late summer skies. Brian wore no tie. They danced barefoot, and when he kissed her forehead after their vows, it felt less like a beginning and more like a homecoming. 3 years later, they welcomed a daughter. They named her Grace. "Because she's the unexpected gift," Christine whispered as she cradled the baby in her arms. "Theon, we didn't think we'd be lucky enough to deserve." Their home was small but warm. Mismatched furniture, art on every wall, laughter. In the hallways and nth living room, above a well-loved couch, hung a framed sketch Christine had drawn long ago, a man alone in a bar booth, a beer untouched in front of him, shadows curling at the edges of his form. But now, beside it, Christine had added something new. A second figure, reaching out, the same booth, the same bar. But this time there was light. Beneath the frame in soft handwritten ink were the words. Sometimes the light begins where the darkness ends. And on a quiet morning, as Brian made breakfast, and Christine read, "Good night, moon," to Grace in a sleepy armchair. No one would have guessed the storms they had come through. No one except them. But they didn't speak after storms anymore. They didn't need to. They'd already learned the most beautiful truth of all. That even themest broken hearts can find their rhythm again if someone's willing to listen closely. Enough. Sometimes it takes Aquiot Bar, a broken past, two lonely hearts to remind us that even after the hardest seasons, love still finds a way. Christine and Brian's story is not just about chance. It's about the kind of healing that happens when we dare to see each other clearly and choose to stay. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of something you've lost or something you found, we invite you to become part of our family. Here at Soul-Stirring Stories, we share true tales and timeless fictions that remind us of hope, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness. Subscribe now to Soul-Stirring Stories so you never miss the next story that might just change your day, or even your life. Till next time, take care of your heart and keep listening for the stories that stir your soul.